Hello valued viewers, I hope you're all doing wonderfully well. Today we're looking at a really interesting piece of history that pretexts the 1982 Falklands War. The Falklands War didn't just involve the Falklands Islands here, it also involved a separate island, South Georgia, several hundred miles southeast of the Falklands. Today we're going to be looking at a specific piece of history when the SAS were landed on the island for the first time. First we need to go over the history. I'm going to let Matrix do that. I apologise that his mic quality isn't great, but please stick with it. It's really interesting.
What I'm going to cover today is the start of Operation Paraquet, the operation to recover South Georgia from the Argentine invasion. Before we can consider the operation to recapture South Georgia, we need to consider the overall context of events and what led up to it. In fact, it's important to understand that the invasion of the Falkland Islands itself by the Argentines was actually triggered by events in South Georgia. First of all, a note. There is a South Atlantic map in DCS, and if we look at this window of Google Earth, this is the area covered approximately by the map in DCS. You'll see the southern tip of South America and the Falkland Islands in their entirety. South Georgia is actually off the map to the east, and if I scroll out, you'll see the relationship between the Falkland Islands here and South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands. This large island here is South Georgia, and these islands around this arc down towards the northern tip of Antarctica are the South Sandwich Islands. So regrettably, the map makers for DCS didn't see fit to extend the map as far as South Georgia, because that would have made an interesting addition. And that will lead us to a slight complication later on. So if we zoom in on South Georgia, you'll see that it is quite inhospitable. In this picture here, it's taken in the winter, with a lot of snow on the high ground, with glaciers indicating that snow and ice is pretty much a permanent feature. The island isn't actually inhabited in winter, and in summer it has a very small population of British Antarctic Survey personnel. You may wonder why this island would have been of any interest to anyone at all, but its history extends back at least 150 to 200 years, when whale oil was the main product of this part of the world. Mineral oil extracted from underground not being extracted in great quantities at that time, whale oil was the main source of oil for things like oil lamps. And consequently whaling was a very popular and very profitable industry. This area of the South Atlantic had great whale populations, and South Georgia formed a sensible base for operations in the area. A number of settlements were founded by different nations involved in whaling. 7 settlements were actually established on South Georgia. Prince Olaf Harbour here to the northwest, which is not particularly extensive and is difficult to see in this picture, but you might be able to make out the buildings clustered around the southern edge of this bay and the pier in the bay itself. Travelling further east, we come to the 3 settlements at Leith Harbour, Stromness and Husvik, the names being chosen by the nationalities of people who actually lived there or worked there. If we scroll in towards Leith, you can see that Leith was the most extensively established whaling settlement in this area. You can see that very few of the buildings are in use these days, principally around the centre here, and most of the buildings and tanks are derelict. Construction is mostly of things like asbestos, corrugated iron, and all things we consider unhealthy these days. Moving down here, we can find it similar at Stromness, again smaller and now mostly disused. And zooming into Husvik, again quite a small settlement, and again very derelict at the moment. The settlement we're mostly interested out of these 3 is Leith, up in the north here. Moving on further southeast, we come to Grytviken. Grytviken was probably the biggest of the whaling settlements here, and again you can see some of the buildings are still in good condition and are still in use, namely the church, there's a library and a couple of other things here as well. Otherwise you can see that most of the whale processing facilities are derelict and rusty. The other feature in this area is the British Antarctic Survey base here at King Edward Point. And this is where the population is in summer, and this forms the centre of operations for the British Antarctic Survey. Scrolling out again, moving to the southeast, there are 2 more abandoned settlements in South Georgia. One here on the coast at Godtool, and as you can see it's completely abandoned, there's only a couple of ruined buildings left there. And Ocean Harbour, and this is entirely derelict, all you can see remaining are the foundations, and a wreck over here in the bay. So an overview of South Georgia. The points of interest for us are Leith Harbour and Grytviken and King Edward Point. So now to the events leading up to the actual invasion of South Georgia. Late in 1981, an Argentine entrepreneur Konstantino Davidov, wanted to investigate the possibility of recovering scrap from the settlements on South Georgia to sell and make a profit. He carried out one trip to South Georgia to reconnoitre the situation late in 1981, but he had failed to observe the protocol which was normally to inform the British Antarctic Survey of your arrival. Essentially, the British Antarctic Survey acted as the administrator for the island. Later on, in 1982, he returned with a more substantial exhibition, and having apologised originally to the British for failing to notify them of their arrival in South Georgia, he once again failed to notify the British of their arrival and landed directly at Leith Harbour with a party outwardly of scrap metal dealers and merchants to recover the materials of Leith Harbour for recycling. Unfortunately, the Argentine military had got wind of this and had decided to infiltrate his party with a load of Argentine Marines. So Davidov's party landed at Leith Harbour on the 11th of March 1982 and started dismantling some of the facilities. The Argentine Marines within the party decided that they were going to erect the Argentine flag, and this was reported to London by British Antarctic Survey personnel who in the course of their duties oversaw Leith Harbour and other areas of South Georgia. Concerned about the situation, the British government ordered HMS Endurance, the Arctic survey ship, which was then currently moored in Port Stanley, to take on board 22 Marines led by Lieutenant Keith Mills and sail immediately for South Georgia. The aim was to land the Marines at Leith and to evict the Argentine scrap metal team and return them back to Argentina. Whilst the Endurance was en route to South Georgia, the British government were nervous about escalating tensions in the area. So they ordered the Endurance to stand off South Georgia and not land the Marines straight away. During this period of standoff, the Argentines landed further reinforcements from Argentina. So the situation in late March 1982 is that HMS Endurance is standing off South Georgia with her party of 22 Marines on board, and the Argentines have landed forces at Leith Harbour, the initial party outwardly of scrap metal dealers, reinforced later by more Argentine personnel. During this period, the British government ordered the Endurance to close with South Georgia and to position Lieutenant Mills's 22 Marines as an observation party overlooking Leith Harbour to monitor activity of the Argentines. Moving forward to the 2nd of April, the plans of the Argentines become very apparent to the rest of the world. The Falkland Islands are invaded, and on the 2nd of April, Argentine forces positioned near South Georgia. So now on to our enactment. The enactment starts on the afternoon of the 21st of March 1982 with the task force of 3 ships, HMS Plymouth, HMS Antrim and RFA Tidespring, anchored about 30 miles northeast of the coast of South Georgia. The helicopters involved in the mission to insert the 15 troops of Mountain Troop D Squadron SAS, a 1 HAS-3 from HMS Antrim, stripped of its anti-submarine equipment in order to carry more troops, and supported by 1 Wessex HU-5 utility helicopter from RFA Tidespring. They depart in the afternoon, proceed the 30 miles towards the Fortuna Glacier and South Georgia, and they make their way up the glacier in poor conditions to insert the SAS troops. It should be borne in mind that the captain of the HMS Endurance, the Arctic research vessel that plied these waters on a regular basis, and the British Antarctic Survey personnel on the island all recommended against this mission because they knew what the conditions on the glacier would be like and suspected that the troops would encounter some very inhospitable conditions. The 2 helicopters made their way to the mouth of the Fortuna Glacier and were able to fly up the glacier some way to deposit the SAS troops. The intention of the SAS troops on disembarking was to make their way across land over towards Leith Harbour to the west, to a point where they could overlook the harbour and observe not just Leith Harbour but Stromness and Husvik, where they suspected the Argentine forces had been landed. Unfortunately, weather conditions on the glacier were inhospitable at the time, with winds gusting up to 60 miles an hour, blizzards and snow showers. It made flying conditions extremely difficult, and it must be recognised that the skill of the helicopter pilots in carrying out the mission was exceptional. The helicopters took off from the glacier and then returned to the task force safely. Late on the 21st and overnight into the 22nd, the commander of the SAS troops on the mountain reported by radio that they'd not been able to make much progress and had decided to bed down as the weather conditions had deteriorated, with winds up to 100 miles an hour and blizzards and snow showers continuing. Unfortunately, the strong winds destroyed most of their tents and they endured a very unpleasant night on the glacier. The commander radioed the task force that he required immediate extraction, otherwise environmental casualties would ensue. On the morning of the 22nd of March, a rescue operation was mounted with 3 helicopters, the HAS-3 from Antrim and the 2 utility HU-5 Wessex helicopters from RFA Tidespring, but the weather in the morning precluded them being able to fly up the glacier and rescue the troops. Later on that day, they made a 3rd attempt, and all 3 helicopters made it up the glacier to the location of the SAS troops, and they all landed safely. The SAS troops were all divided up amongst the helicopters, and one of them, having boarded the troops slightly ahead of the others, the pilot determined that there was a slight lull in the weather, and he was able to lift off safely. Unfortunately, as he did so, the weather closed in again, and he encountered whiteout conditions, became disorientated and lost control. The helicopter crashed at very low speed, and all of the occupants survived, with one very minor injury. The other 2 helicopters had seen this and decided to hold on the ground and board the remaining survivors from the crashed helicopter. As the helicopters lifted off the glacier and departed, the pilot of the remaining Wessex HU-5 helicopter failed to see a very small ice ridge in the whiteout conditions and caught the wheel on this ice ridge, causing the helicopter to crash at very low speed and very low altitude. As before, all of the occupants of the helicopter survived, again with one very minor injury, and they disembarked safely. Unfortunately, the remaining helicopter was too overloaded and proceeded back to the Antrim to offload their troops. The pilot, Lieutenant Commander Ian Stanley, made 2 further attempts to go back up the glacier to rescue the troops, but was turned back by bad weather. On the 3rd attempt, however, he was able to fly up the glacier, land, board all the remaining survivors, take off overweight and proceed for an overweight landing back on the Antrim.
I'm off the deck. You guys can join.
Roger, 2 helicopters airborne.
Okay, you should be able to get in now, guys.
Roger, welcome in viewers to the start of the mission and the insert of the SAS troops. For some reason we couldn't get in the helicopters when they were on the ships, so we had the boys had to take them off, and now we're in. Right, so we've got Matrix flying 1 Wessex, and we've got Simbra, you flying the 2nd aircraft.
Affirm.
Roger, and we're packed full of boys, so packed full of Poosh as well, Dark and Bird, and hello you lot.
Yeah, can you turn on the heated seats in the back, please?
You cannot. Wessex 100% did not have heated seats. Viewers, in case you don't know what a Wessex is, I'll put one up on the screen now so you can see. Obviously we had several different versions, so we've got 2 versions here. And we're heading onto the glacier to insert the SAS troops. Now, it just so happens that probably most of the people skipped the briefing, Matrix, so most of your work was probably completely in vain. But if you had to give a kind of 30-60 second envelope of what we're doing here.
British task force arrived off South Georgia, wanted to insert reconnaissance squads of Special Air Service and Special Boat Service. Against professional advice, they decided to try and land some SAS reconnaissance troops up on a glacier on the coast of South Georgia, who would then yomp over land to take up observation positions over the Argentines. Sadly, the weather was really poor with very strong winds and snow. Presented a really challenging environment for the helicopter pilots, who performed extremely well to get the guys up onto the glacier and latterly to go and rescue them when conditions got even worse.
The terrain looks great. It looks really not dissimilar to a lot of South Georgia. The photos I've seen of South Georgia, it's where the ships were. I remember seeing cliffs like that, viewers, of thousands of feet of just black volcanic rock. And then on land, a lot of the time, it was just snow and glaciers and absolute misery. You kind of see why people didn't want to live there. But now we know why, due to Matrix's lovely intro. The bravery, we're carrying SAS, I believe, on this part of the mission. I guess there's a fine line between bravery and stupidity, but yeah, they really pushed the boat out on what they thought was possible.
I mean, the SAS are renowned for doing things that normal troops wouldn't even contemplate, and I've worked with them professionally years ago, and they really surprised me with what they can do. They're a hard bunch of men. They're
a special bunch, special breed, and I'm sure this is the same with other special services throughout the world. But the book I'm reading at the moment is very helicopter based and therefore very much related to SAS insertions. And every time they talk about the SAS, the upper brass say, no, this mission just isn't possible to do. And every time the SAS overrule it and say, yes, actually we can do this. I'm just reading about the Pebble Island attacks by the SAS, so the crazy insertions that they had to do. that wasn't enough, so then they decided, the SAS, they were going to fly a Sea King all the way from Falklands Islands, 400 miles, to Argentina to raid an Argentinian base. Of course, that completely failed as well, and the helicopter ended up having to take the troops to Chile, where the helicopter was retired. But it just shows the crazy can-do attitude that they can have going into this type of terrain. But also the pilots, the British pilots, helicopter pilots that had to support them, take them in. A lot of crazy bravery going on. I suppose that's exactly what we're going to see today, guys.
I'm interested in what our ground speed is, because our indicated airspeed's 110 knots. Well, we're kind of going sideways in it.
Yeah, the winds prevailing were from the west. So down here, you'd probably have had 45 mile an hour winds from the west in snow and blizzards, a bit like this. And yeah, the turbulence would have been horrendous, and the ground speed would have probably been about 30 knots down on what you'd expect.
So you're almost... so
I'm just wondering if somebody wanted to get a true speed on us.
Yeah, I'll do that now, stand by. We are moving. Wow, true speed, apparently 81 knots. It's an ambitious true speed.
I'm going to throw out my rope with the knots attached, Simba, so we can see what speed we're doing in the water.
Yeah, right. The original
Noise.
knots, because then we're going sideways.
Going back to the SAS, though, I remember that Peter Kay has a great joke about those who ever drink tea and dunk biscuits in it. And sometimes, you know, if you leave it for too long, your biscuit will fall into your tea. The SAS are the hobnobs of the tea biscuit drinking world.
That analogy is completely lost on me.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you leave you Americans out. You don't like tea. You threw it in Boston.
It's American doing driving in this dang mission. Talking about harsh winds, guys, in some way, I mean, I've read a thorough reenactment chapter about this mission in a book, and one thing that surprised me was, in some ways, although it was terrible, high winds can actually help helicopters. You know, obviously a headwind can help an aeroplane. It means they can fly slower over the ground. Well, the same is actually true over a helicopter. Was anyone aware of that?
Oh yes, very much.
So just like when an aeroplane wants to launch off a carrier, it turns into the wind to help it take off. The same with a helicopter. These 60-knot winds allowed overloaded Wessex helicopters in this scenario to do things that they otherwise couldn't have done. They can almost, you know, hover where they couldn't have hovered before. So that's interesting. But the thing about the wind is it's unpredictable. It changes, and it's, you know, it can have gusts that come out of nowhere.
Yeah, looking at the terrain around here with the prevailing winds, you'd have had some horrendous amount of turbulence. Rotors, up and down draft like nothing else. It would have been just really unpleasant.
The topography looks great, just like it did from pictures that I've seen, viewers, although it may be a little bit taller in real life, because like I said, the cliffs were thousands of feet high, but otherwise it looks just like it was. Tiny little, and they were always searching for gaps in clouds, weren't they, to try and, you know, find ways of getting up and down, and we've got a tiny little gap in front of us.
Yeah, I mean, the weather is modelled really nicely, as is the terrain, so it does create a nice atmosphere of how the island was.
One other interesting thing I've read about was the violent unpredictableness of the weather. So in a normal country like mine, the weather changes very slowly and it doesn't change very much. But here, for whatever reason that I'll never understand, you can have bright sunshine, and 10 minutes later you can have 70-knot crazy winds that will blow houses down. It was just, it constantly changes, and so it made doing missions, and I guess that's one of the reasons, well, the reason why this mission ran into such problems. They would insert and then all of a sudden hit by a massive snowstorm that they simply couldn't deal with.
The anti-submarine Wessex, the HS-3, was equipped with better instrumentation, which is why it led these helicopters on these missions, because it could cope with the instrument flying conditions better than the other.
Did this one have the radar? One of them had the radar.
Yeah, they took all the radar off so they could carry the troops and stuff, but the flight instrumentation was better. On the recovery, it was the anti-submarine Wessex that actually survived of the three.
They actually did still have the radar on. They reinstalled it.
They did when I think they reinstalled it when the action against the submarine Santa Fe was taking place. And that was later on the, I think it was the 22nd of April.
So there's a book by the Observer on that Wessex called Going South. He describes the mission really well, and they did have the radar at that time. He was using it to help navigate up the glacier.
I didn't know the book.
No, I didn't know that either.
No, there was a book, so it sounds like I'll have to get that, because this was crazy stuff. Is this the glacier?
It is. We're just moving up the glacier now.
Okay.
You can see the high ground beginning to emerge. We'll land before that.
Why did they choose the glacier? Is it because it was a relatively steady approach?
History doesn't really relate. I think they wanted to land somewhere where they knew they wouldn't be observed by the Argentines, so they picked somewhere with ridges in between. But to be honest, I mean, the professionals down there, as I mentioned, the British Antarctic Survey and the captain of the Endurance both said, don't go up there because the conditions are going to be terrible. And they were.
Could you look to see if we have any anti-icing switches to turn on? Because my thermostat says we're below 0.
Oh dear. We're going to freeze those
1
blades up.
second. Let's see what we've got on this bird.
You know where the fuel switch is, the yellow guarded one?
Yep.
Press that.
Just behind that one.
Oh yeah. What says de-icing is on, so good luck.
Which is probably
I
why
just
you're
wanted
still.
to make sure.
Yeah,
That's probably why you're still flying.
One thing about glaciers, though, is they are actually quite flat tops compared to the terrain, so it probably was a safe landing zone.
They tend to be a relatively steady curve than, jagged. And if you're flying in whiteout, I mean, we're not in whiteout here, we're in moderately good visibility, but a lot of this mission was done in whiteout where they couldn't see.
And you can see that even though the vis is quite good here, in parts, if we were to fly ahead up towards the high ground, it would be very poor. Lead is going to turn right shortly, slow down and land in our 1 o'clock.
Good luck. In terms of landing viewers, one thing I've read about is that obviously it was done by the pilot, but it was also very much done by the co-pilot and the guy in the rear who would guide him in.
This is going to be tricky because visual reference is going to be very slow, but you're going to have 40 knots plus of airspeed. So doing the landing is going to be a little bit tricky.
I know we had a rat out.
You'll also be landing with a lot less power than you would normally due to the translational lift.
You do have a radar altimeter.
They did have radouts on the Wessex guys, but because of the undulating terrain, it was next to useless. Although it's not modelled here, the real glacier was full of loads of, I don't know what they're called, like crevices?
Crevasses, yeah.
Crevasses, yeah. So every time you went over a crevasse, it was like 1,000 feet, 50 feet, 1,000 feet, 50 feet, 1,000 feet, 50 feet. So you couldn't really read your radouts very well. We're getting some lovely 3D shots, viewers. Sorry that there's no combat today, viewers. We thought we would try something different. The baddie, rather than being guys with guns today, the baddie really was the weather. And just the mission planning, just pushing the envelope a little bit too far.
And soon you're going to make us do winter hikes, Scott.
75 feet.
Good landing.
Leaders touchdown.
Yep.
50. 40. 20. I won't do the Airbus to call out.
Artard, not demonetized.
5, 3,
Down.
1. Good done.
Good landing, guys. Really well done.
Nice one.
We're now disembarking our SAS troops. Now, the Wessex had wheels instead of skids, viewers, and because of the winds, they never really stood still. They were constantly blown about on the ice, and they never really stopped. All right, well, we just hope the weather doesn't get any worse. When you're ready, I guess we're lifting off. We're going to pseudo head back to base.
K2, you're closer to the track if you'd like to lift first.
Roger, lifting. Yeah, I want to see this landing on the ship.
You want to try the one later.
Possibly go wrong.
2's airborne.
Leads airborne. I'm not really concerned. Just fly safely down towards the glacier. I'd like to say it's in the 12 o'clock, but it's more like 1:30.
I am full right rudder.
Yep.
Yeah, don't forget to use your trim. Head to the left of these two small peaks on the nose. You'll need to see them. You'll need to track them just in front of the right edge of the windshield.
Yeah, the glacier goes off to the sea just at our 2 o'clock.
Yeah, it splits around these two. The left-hand fork is the more realistic for Fortuna Glacier.
Well, it's saying 110 knots indicated on the old speedo, but I think we're probably only doing like 50.
Correct.
I don't even think we're doing that.
Yeah, we do have a bit of a headwind component. It's when we get off the glacier, it's going to be the component will be at its greatest. So your ground speed will be down to about 50 knots there.
The other part about this is the first time these crews had operated on a glacier.
Although we're not really going to talk about it today, another major action in South Georgia was, of course, the striking of the previously American-owned Santa Fe submarine operated by the Argentinians. And that's a whole different story in itself. But that was based around Grytviken, which I think is over to our right, matrix.
Yeah, that's true. And a whole bunch of inhospitable terrain as well between us.
Ooh, you can really feel that wind picked up.
Oh, yes. When you're flying down a valley like this, if you're flying on the upwind side, you get downdraft from the mountains, so your performance is really poor. So you want to fly closer to the downwind side, where you get the updraft. But if you get too close, it gets a bit nasty. You do need to keep a close eye on your instruments here, because the speed will be all over the shop.
We're visual with the inlet.
Well done.
Hey, phone, we're trailing you by about a mile. This inlet moves off to the left, and you'll get even slower down there.
Found the cabin heating for you, Dart.
Got
Oh, yeah?
heating.
So do I need to follow this inlet left?
Yeah, just track down the middle of it.
Too bad they don't have the guns. I could just, fire it until the barrel was hot and then use that to heat my hands up.
Sure.
Co-pilot fiddling with switches.
Yep. Which way is it to the ship? Do we know? Or are we just going blind here?
When we get to the end of it, it'll turn right slightly, and then you just proceed slightly right of that, and the ship should be visible from the end of the inlet.
Navigation at the time was a real bitch as well, from what I've read about. I mean, in an ideal world, you would do radio navigation, and you would pick up on the radio signal and you triangulate it through the systems that even this Huey has, or the Wessex had. But in wartime, you're not allowed to send that radio signal out. So a lot of the time, your navigation would be dead reckoning on a map and a compass and a stopwatch and understanding what the wind is and doing the calculations on the fly. And you had to do that accurate enough to get within visual of the aircraft carrier or the ship that you were looking for. And if visibility was down to a couple of miles, you can see how accurate you had to be. If you lost it, you were in an absolute world of pain. You were going for a swim.
I've got my ordnance survey map out.
When some of the Sea Harrier FRS-1s positioned down to Illustrious or Hermes, and they tankered down with the Victor tankers, the problem was the weather when they got down there was really poor, and the only way they could find the ships was they stood, the seamen on the back of the carriers, chucking flares off at set intervals. I think something like 15 seconds, he'd chuck a flare over, it would float in the wake of the Invincible or Hermes, and the Harrier pilots would pick that up in the murk, follow the flares up the wake to, absolutely fucking insane, really insane. But, they didn't lose anyone, did the job.
No, absolutely. There were a total of 150 helicopters operating in the Falklands campaign, and at least in the first phase, or the first couple of weeks, to go round, there were seven night vision goggles for them. And they were used for the jungly seekings to put the SAS to insert them into various dangerous areas. But the other guys, a lot of the other helicopters still had to fly at night, just without night vision goggles. How they did it is freaking beyond me. And those night vision goggles are first gen as well, so they're not like the ones you see now, super nice ones.
You're looking through a toilet paper roll?
That's exactly as it
Sort of,
described
yeah.
it. A monochrome described it as flying a seeking through a monochrome, whatever you just said. And you didn't have any depth perception either because it was single monocle. So, real nightmare.
Simba, this jut of land here is sticking out just on the right. We should continue on this heading and we should pick up the ships here, I hope.
Forwards and to your right, hopefully.
In a minute, I can just see it appearing out of the soup. There's another landmass off our nose, Simba. Aim for that. Yeah, I can see one now.
You can see ships?
Yeah, off our nose.
Are you sure, Bird?
I'm pretty sure, unless it's a humpback whale. On the nose, maybe about 5 miles.
Alright, take your word for it. Oh,
Maybe less.
Yes, I see it! Friggin' the eyes on Bird. Yeah, well done. Right, now can we still see Simba?
I can't see it at the moment,
Yes,
but I'm
I
not too
see
fussed
him.
about that.
Yes, I see him. We're going the right way. I see him right there. I'm going to do this in real life, guys.
The exciting bits to come. You don't go too far, right? Remember to take the drift into account.
Coming up off our 1 o'clock. You not see the big ship now?
Was Tide Spring a landing ship? An amphibious, I can't remember. Auxiliary.
I think it's Royal Fleet Auxiliary, so it was big and had two hangars, helicopters,
Yeah, probably not dissimilar to what we've actually got there, amazing.
Exactly, yeah.
You were landing on the big one, Simba, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. The Tide Spring would have had more extensive facilities for handling injured people.
No one was injured yet, though, were they, Matrix?
Not at this stage, no, surprisingly.
Alright, Simba, watch out for BRS. It's a friggin' nightmare. That is all.
I might have been classified as injured by how sick I would be if I was in this helicopter. This weather.
VRS is less of a problem today because you're not actually transitioning into a hover. You're still maintaining 40 knots forward airspeed.
So the hover is not hover. It's actually moving at 40 knots, 50 knots ahead. It's just you're not moving over the ground.
Yeah, correct.
So in some ways, so it is like an aeroplane then. Wind can help you as long as it's a static wind and not moving around too much. You know what I mean? Wow, Simba
yeah.
so overshot that.
Yeah, we're being blown away now.
Bye, Simba. I'll see you later.
Similar for Matrix, I'm going to transition behind the tide spring and head to the Antrim.
Roger.
Antrim. So that was the frigate that was sunk, a few days later, on the 22nd of May.
It wasn't sunk. It was the bomb that one that had the bomb in the lab.
The Ardent was sunk.
Antrim.
Yeah, this is Antrim, not
Sorry.
Antrim.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Poosh, you're a friggin' fountain of knowledge.
Well, I read that book. It's got, like I said, it's pretty
Well done.
interesting.
Absolutely right. Antrim got hit, and we covered it yesterday, didn't we? They had the bomb that went inside it, didn't it? And then, and it was damaged, damaged anyway. And so they had to put it into Sankar's waters, and they had to cut the bomb out of the bottom of the ship. There's a famous picture on the internet of the bomb in the ship, and they had to cut the bomb out of the ship, and they just dropped it into the water, didn't they?
Yeah, I think, is that the one where they had to cut a hole in the flight deck?
Yeah.
Yes.
Helicopter flight deck, and they lifted it out and dropped it over.
That's it. Yeah, amazing.
So look at this. You see, we've got very low power. I've tried to come to a stop, and the wind is causing us to balloon a bit. So softly here.
Oh, Simba's made it back. All right, Simba. Good luck.
Power, little power.
Careful, Matrix.
The People's Chap
Can he do it? Can he do it?
on the...
Yeah, oh, we'll take that. That wasn't. That was
Oh,
fine.
what?
He didn't do anything wrong. That's just DCS being DCS.
Yep.
It was a perfectly fine landing, viewers. We all saw it. Right, can Matrix do the same?
You're getting turbulence off the superstructure.
Is that the
Yeah, up
sea?
and down drafts.
No, that's not the sea slug. That's the Azeroth, isn't it? That's the mortar.
Sea cat.
No, it just doesn't matter. The thing below you I'm talking
Oh,
about.
underneath us, yeah, that's
Sea
right.
cat there.
Terrible sized landing deck.
It really is, yeah, and they had to land in the Falklands. They had to land oversized helicopters on these ships. So these were called small ships, and they were supposed to operate small helicopters, Wasps, Lynxes, but because of all sorts of reasons, casualties, emergencies, they had to land the big helicopters on there, the Wessex, the Sea King, which were oversized, and so they not often clipped their rotors on this gantry here, viewers, and clipped the edge of their rotors off. Quite often what they had to do, if I unlocked there, was they couldn't fit on, basically fit on, so they had to kind of land one wheel there and then maintain a hover with the other wheel over here and the rear wheel over here. I mean, the skill was just crazy, while lifting off often burnt and horrendously injured sailors.
So the Canadians have this system where they can fire a dart out of the bottom of the helicopter into the helipad, and it winches them down.
I wonder if that could be bad in some cases. Can you jettison the dart in an emergency?
You'd have to be able to. Just like if you were attached to a cargo sling.
Well, the Matrix. It's just bugged.
Cool.
That reminds me of
it's a
how they
bit-
refuel some of like the Coast Guard helicopters and things out at sea.
Hold on. Well, what's happened now, viewers, is I think it was just a matter of hours, a couple of days later, the SAS realised that they were in massive trouble. They were suffering hypothermia and they needed extraction. Welcome back, viewers. We've flown another 15 miles from the thingies. I'm flying this time for my sins. Bird is flying and Matrix is leading and has 3 again. This time, as per real life, the weather conditions have deteriorated. What's the wind? 65 knots.
Something like 65 to 70 miles an hour.
As you can see, we're registering 80 knots, but that's all wind. What's actually happening is we're moving over the surface sideways. So we're literally flying sideways. That's how you have to fly in this wind. Anyone know roughly how fast we're flying over the ground? Oh,
I'd estimate about 30 to 40 knots.
I just actually look left and saw the troops. Are there separate groups of men? I can't really look.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you find mine, Simba?
Yep, Bird, we got ours at 10 o'clock.
Ours
Close.
are... We gotta go back a little bit.
Roger back.
Just trying to put this chopper into the wind now, using that
Back about
smoke as a good
50
guidance.
yards.
Roger. Don't take off
Yeah,
yet,
that is
Matrix.
helpful.
Matrix has
Keep
landed.
going back.
Roger. I'm just going to take it easy because I'm awfully worried.
Yep. Straight back.
Am I going backwards? I can't really tell.
Yeah,
Going
just
back-
slightly. Yep. You're doing fine. Just keep that pace,
Mustn't be a sign.
that direction.
Matrix is embarking.
Yes, you are. Just taking all your troops. Nice.
All right, come a little bit to the right.
We're down.
Done.
Yep, keep going. A little bit to the right, a little bit more back, about another 30 yards. All right, you can start setting it down.
Roger.
Ooh, what's the door open button again?
Yes. Oh, Simba. Good navigation. Good navigation. That's why I've got my crew members here, viewers. Sorry if I killed them, by the way.
Left alt plus D.
Left alt plus D. Left alt plus D. Right, I'm going to embark my troops. Stand by.
Yeah, yours will be SAS2 and SAS3 for number 3.
Never done this before. You can
Get on,
start
boys.
embarking. Come on, boys. Yeah, they're getting on my helicopter. Right.
Yeah, we're loaded up.
I'm going to try taking off first because I'm the newest pilot here. All of a sudden, viewers, out of nowhere comes a massive blizzard that we just can't simulate. But imagine, the whole area whites out, the winds intensify, the gusts intensify. Now, although I'm static here in the sim, in reality it doesn't work like this. In reality, I'm sliding all around the place. I'm spinning, moving the disc of the helicopter, trying to compensate. And all of a sudden, whoosh, we're over. 2 is down, 2 is down. I look around, we have a couple of injuries, but the SAS guys are okay, and the aircrew are okay. We've got no choice now. We've got to fit all of these troops into 2 helicopters. We start to move on land. La la la, I'm on land, I'm on land. Now I move to Bird's helicopter, don't I, Matrix? Okay, we are moving over to fit in the other, what was it, HU5? HU5.
Yeah. I mean, Bird could actually lift and go and pick those guys up, I guess.
Go on then, Bird, go on then, Bird. Come and get them. They're making a little run
Carefully.
for it. Carefully.
Oh, I know what they're doing. They're marching to the next waypoint, which is on the boat.
Right, well, we've got 15 miles to go. Right, we're going to have to do it by roleplay in that case, guys. Bird, open your door, open your door. The extra troops have got to come in. All right. They're in. Now make your way over to Matrix, please.
Headed that way.
Matrix, there's a gap in the weather, so as soon as Bird gets with you, we're going to head off for the ships.
Roger, Sam.
Those guys are not interested in the reenactment. They're just legging it home.
Roger, lifting now.
As per real life, they stay low. In fact, almost all helicopter flying done in this campaign was done at like 30 feet. Now, as is typical, viewers, in the South Georgia at this time, or any time pretty much, another whiteout hit. They're having to navigate by Radout, but the Radout is unreliable because of the crevasses. All of a sudden, Bird's helicopter, his HU5, clips one of its wheels on the edge of a crevasse. Oh no, I've clipped my wheel, and I'm down! This is terrible. We've now got all of these troops, plus injured aircrew, that we need to get out in a single helicopter. Whatever can we do, Matrix?
Well, what I'll do is I'll return to the boat and come back and pick up the remainder.
There goes Cap's troops running across the field behind Matrix.
Yeah. Hi, troopers. I'll see you back at the boat. Get to the boat. Welcome back, viewers. Matrix has deposited his load of troops and aircrew and he's now worked his way back to the crash site, where he's going to proceed to overload himself with the remaining SAS and aircrew that need rescuing.
Hurry, Matrix, it's cold here on the glacier.
Yeah, most of the troops by this point were hypothermic.
Go huddle by the fire.
It's just impossible to operate in these scenarios. Apart from those guys who are also running home. Damn AI, ruining our reenactments. Otherwise spotless reenactments, guys. An excellent, excellent acting. I don't know the snow's gone, but the snow's disappeared.
It's coming. You look to
Coming
the...
back.
Is inbound.
I see
yeah,
it.
there's 2 wrecks. I'm going to go to the one nearest the smoke.
Roger.
I can see the smoke's, the snow's on its way back.
Right,
Oh, it's coming in.
let's get done before we get another whiteout.
I think we're gonna dig an igloo here on the side of this hill, Bird.
Yep, here comes the snow again.
Ja, der Schnee kommt. Beautiful flying from the one remaining Wessex, the smaller of the 3 actually. Right, all remaining SAS and aircrew on board. Let's go home! Poosh, do you know if it was only the HAS 3 that had the radar and not the other 2?
Yes, it's only they were tasked. They were the reasons they went up was to they could use the radar to lead the other two in.
Well, that tells a story then, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You run it, get that book, read that chapter on this part of the mission.
Yep.
And he was also the observer that found the submarine.
A Santa Fe. Wow, friggin' eagle-eyed, best observer in the world. Is he the guy who wrote the book?
Yeah, he's the guy that wrote the book, and they were also the lead aircraft that put the SAS in on Fanning Head. So he's like the Forrest Gump of Falklands.
Wow, yeah, Fanning Head. We covered that yesterday, when they had to take out that detachment of Argentine Marines.
I do not retain nearly this much knowledge when I read a book.
You notice that? I've already forgotten one I've just read. I can't even remember what the one before that was I read. My brain no longer works.
Jack, you need to stop reading comic books, that's why.
It's true.
Should be heading to our 12 o'clock, but I need to put that in our 2 o'clock.
Yeah, okay.
Battling a bit of downdraft here.
I heard liquid rockets are great as long as you don't fill them with water.
Have you seen the video of the Chinese rocket that looks strangely a lot like a SpaceX rocket? They were trying to do a static fire on the ground, and it happened to escape its ground holds and took off.
Yep, the Chinese one, the Chinese space hackers. So in the real mission, did he have to do 2 extra trips, this pilot, to get all the crew, or did he just pick them all up in the return?
He went back to the ship, dropped off the first load of guys, and then he went back up the glacier. Twice he had to turn back, but on the third attempt, got back up the glacier and picked up the remaining troopers. So nobody died. You have to be really careful when you get references like this, because you can be fooled into thinking it's quite level, but actually it's quite downhill. You can easily overspeed or over-torque the rotor.
And a 100 foot of visibility is a lot shorter than you think it is.
Right, we are over the sea! South Atlantic.
Cruise speed, 61 knots.
Whoa, look at that view behind him. Thousands of feet of mountain behind him. That's kind of cool. Right, that's it. We're out into the open sea now.
What they would do is they would assign, on tactical support squadrons, they'd assign a few of the pilots to support SAS operations. They'd also do it for a number of other things as well. So, for example, laser-guided bombing. When that first came in, we only had half the people on the squadron were qualified to do it.
Yeah, but I see the weather's moving in on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, so this is going to be a 65 knot plus crosswind. I'm assuming you're going for tide spring.
Yeah, common sense would dictate the largest deck would be the best.
That's no fun.
Taking a slightly different route back this time, viewers. It's so difficult to navigate. We just followed this coast here. In real life, I believe they were further out to sea, so navigating would have been even more difficult.
Well, that's where the Wessex's radar would have come in.
Yep.
Oh, it's a nice pitching deck on that screen.
Oh, yes.
Right, anyone that's in multi-crew in a helicopter, it might be a good idea to get out so it just becomes Matrix. That might stop the bugging when it crashes, blows up.
Crashes or lands?
Hey, any crash you can walk away from is a good landing.
Wouldn't normally agree, but in this circumstance,
So are the ships pointed into the wind?
not quite.
Okay.
You don't really want the ships pointed directly into wind because
Yeah.
you get too much turbulence off the superstructure.
On, Stanley. Put it down. Good lad.
Softly, softly, catchy monkey.
In the real world, they'd probably be moving. It might be a little bit smoother, but this is pretty good.
It's pitching enough, thank you.
Yeah.
And pitching back up. And Max pitching back down. Coming back up. And
Too far back, too far back, too
Big-
far back, too far
Oh,
back, too far
no!
back.
They
He's
are
caught it on
down.
the net, he's caught it on the net. Near enough, guys.
Oh, that was
God,
tricky.
Just shows how difficult that is. Well done, you make it back.
Yeah.
All your troops are still alive. That's it, it's our reenactment, viewers. We just wanted to show us a really interesting piece of history that happened, as we said, precursing to Falklands War. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and bye-bye.